I cannot believe the energy I've got. I cannot believe I'm the same person that was lying down this passage in bed, hardly alive.
Dirk, how did you find carnivore?
Dave, it's actually a very long story. It starts way back. And, it brings me to a conclusion that I've recently come to, and that is that, no matter how much we know what we need to do and are so committed to do exactly what we need to do, we are still controlled to a very large degree by the environment that you're in and the people that you mix with, your social interaction, and whoever you're living with. And, I think I'm a bit different from a lot of people in this area, in carnivore, where my problem started way early. My problem started as a child. Like when I was a little nipper, I was a fruit bat right from the word go. I just love fruit. And of course, I had an indulgent mother because I was a late child. The others had virtually, they'd almost gone. They were all 10, 13 years older than me. So she had this last one child and she spoiled me rotten. And, I was fed sugary foods, chocolates, Coke, whatever, right? And so I was a fat kid. And this persisted with me all the way through. Through my school years, all the school years, except senior school, because I was in a boarding school. Well, this was in the 60s, where we weren't already subject to all the nonsense that's around now. We were still eating, shall we say, a more balanced diet. Not as many carbs, a bit of this, a bit of that. And so I didn't do too badly, and I actually lost a bit of weight in senior school. And then I went to the army, and of course, national service, where I made the mistake of volunteering for one of this elite battalion, which meant that they chased us morning and night. We never even walked. You ran wherever you went, you ran. And so running 12 hours a day, pretty much 6 days a week, well, it doesn't matter how much you eat, you get thin. So I dropped right down. My weight I dropped down to what I would then consider 77 kilograms, right? And at 77, I'm reasonably slim. But I mean, the diet we were eating like 8 slices of bread for breakfast, maybe 12, then plus bacon and eggs, sausages, whatever. And so, extreme exercise, yes, it keeps you skinny. It keeps you probably healthy. And then, of course, after that, I went to uni and then eventually went to work and had a family. And, of course, young family, very ambitious. I used to work my butt off. And didn't worry too much about diet because what we used to eat was, in my view now, an incredibly unhealthy diet. We'd kick off with oat porridge or corn porridge and then bacon and eggs and sausages and what have you. And then for lunch you would have meat, potatoes, rice, pasta, bit of veggies, and then dessert. And of course, because I was working physically very hard, I pretty much had things sort of under control, I think. But I was probably already either pre-diabetic or diabetic because in those days the doctors never did blood tests on you. And how I eventually got diagnosed with diabetes is, it was just a very strange coincidence. My wife had a friend who was a type 1 diabetic. And this friend of hers that kept on telling her, what happened to her when she went into a, hyper and when she had to take insulin and what have you. And I'd been out working on a trailer, physical work. And the next thing, I was just gone. And I walked into the house and drank a big glass of pineapple beer that my wife had made. And that knocked me right out. And she couldn't understand that I'd just gone to sleep. I just lay down and gone to sleep. So she went and borrowed her friend's blood glucose meter. My blood glucose was 22. And then I spoke to my brother, who was a GP back in South Africa, but we were already living in Australia for a long time by then. And he told me that I really need to go and see a doctor. And so I went to see a doctor, and yes, they confirmed I'm diabetic, and they put me on I think, I can't even remember the name of the medication. I think it was called glycoside or glycoside, and it basically knocked the hell out of your pancreas, right? And so then I had another problem. Like, what do I do when I go hypo? Well, you take a tablet, or you take sugar. Sorry, the other way around. You eat sweets. I used to carry sugar lollies with me. So it's the sort of method that doctors seem to like using is you stimulate the release of insulin, so you get the sugars down, and if you do it too much, then you take sugars to balance your sugars. And and the truth eventually dawned on me when I started just, I think, the early days of the internet, and I came across an article or something about Gary Taubes, who'd written a book called Why We Get Fat and What to Do About It. I can't remember the exact title. And I read that, and then I thought, hang on, there's more to this than meets the eye. And then from that point onwards, I guess I became an information junkie. I wanted to find out, what can I do? Because I'd always been very active, which sort of meant to keep my, shall we say, my disease state reasonably under control. I mean, I used to cycle a lot. I used to run. I used to take the dogs for a walk. So I've always been active. And but at one stage, I think, you go nuts sometimes. I actually became a vegetarian for about 6 months. And that didn't work out well at all. And so I think the real breakthrough came when I read Nina Teisel's book, The Big Fat Surprise, and and that really opened my eyes, because my background is in science. I mean, I did an honors degree in science. So, I always believed in science. I believed the doctors. I totally subscribed to what they told me. No fat, minimize meat, eat grains. I used to have big grain breakfasts the way they told me. And then they pumped me full of medications and then surprised at what's happening. So, but as I said earlier, I think the biggest problem is, the temptations and our own addictions. So even though I was very committed to being, well, initially keto, and I guess eventually that gravitated into full carnivore, but it took a long time. And during the keto time, you go to the supermarket, there's a Kit Kat for $1. Oh, well, I'll just throw it in my what's $1? What's the little Kit Kat going to do? And so you sort of in and out of the right level of blood sugar. You sort of get a little bit over the top, and then you get it down again. And so, and to me, the biggest issue of that is that attitude, being prepared to put up with your environment and responding to that, ended in me getting really, really ill. When I say ill, I'm not the type of person that complains about things. If I get a cold, I just deal with it. But this time was different. You know, we'd gone up north and stopped along the road at a roadside coffee van, and we bought a coffee. And I had this coffee, and by the time we got to the camping area, I said to my wife, "I'm not right. There's something not right. I think we cancelled our booking, tell the people I wasn't well, and we better get home." So we packed up, and I struggled like hell. I got home, parked the van, went and laid down. Monday, I tried to see the doctor. I got to the doctor, and Thea had to help me out of the car and into the doctor's surgery. And he got me to sit on the bed. And I couldn't. They had to help me up. My muscles were just gone. And so we did a very quick blood test, and told me to come back in 24 hours time. By that time we'd have the results. I went back, and I mean, I could hardly walk, and I felt, if you know what it feels like to think you're going to die, well, that's how I felt. And I remember saying to him, "I'm not well," and he said, "I'm not surprised." What he had done, he'd done a CRP test, which is a measure of your inflammation. And afterwards, I learned that your normal inflammation measure of CRP should be between 0 and 6. Well, mine was a little bit higher than that. Mine was 185. And so he said, "Right, straight to a hospital." So I ended up in A&E at the local university hospital, and they did some blood tests, and a guy came and walked around with me, and he said, "Well, yeah, I think you should go home and just recover, because there's no medication we can give you." And my doctor confirmed there's nothing they could give me to treat this unless they tried to establish whether I had COVID. That came negative. Whether I had any any of the other viral diseases around, nothing. And I mean, and I just lay there, and if I say I lay there, I mean I just lay there for like 5 weeks, and my brain went, my mind went, and I gave my poor old wife such a hard time, because I can't believe that she put up with me. Because by that time I was already on sort of a semi-carnivore, like carnivore with a little bit of veggies, but no real carbs, but still digressing from time to time, having a bit of chocolate, having some ice cream and what have you, nonsense. And I just had this incredible desire for oranges. I just said, I need an orange. I think I need vitamin C. So she went and bought a bag of oranges just to get me to shut up. So I had some oranges. And then I said, "That's not enough. I need some grapes." And so I scoffed grapes and oranges, and all that happened. Well, I got really worse. And it took me about, I think eventually, and my mind went like, I was talking absolute gibberish. And she thought, she was scared I was going to die. And one of our sons comes and stays with us from time to time, and he came and he saw me and he went, "Oh." And he sort of thought, "Oh, we're going to be burying this guy soon." And then one morning I just decided, hang on, I need to test my blood sugar, because I hadn't been testing nothing. And I tested my blood sugar and it was 18. And then I knew, now I'm in trouble. And I just screamed to my wife, "Yeah, come here." So she came up, and I said, "Right, from now on, it's meat only." That's it. And essentially, that's how my real carnivore started. And within about 3 weeks, took about 3 weeks, maybe longer. I can't remember. My brain was not with me. I managed to get out of the bed on my own. I could stumble to the bathroom. But my legs were that weak. And I had lost my weight before this started. I was about 70, 76 kilos. And by the time I sort of were back on my feet, not lying in the bed all day, I was down to 56. And that was in a matter of 4 weeks.
Just to be clear, when was this? When you? How long ago was it when you were you just screamed to your wife, "Only steak from now on"? How long ago was that?
That was around about the 20th of June last year. And then, it was almost instant when I started feeling better. And then I went back to the doctor and he did another blood test. And I told him that I'm now better, but I still needed help to get into his surgery. Theo would walk with me, right? And he did a CRP test, and I think it was 5 or 6. So down from 185 to 5 or 6. And he said, okay, well, I'll probably only need to see you in 3 weeks' time. Come back in 3 weeks and we'll check it again. Went back 3 weeks later and it was down to 0. And so from that moment on, I then really got into what I call, shall we say, the people that I have more confidence in. And that's when I started listening to Gary Fetka, Ken Berry, Anthony Chaffee, Paul Mason, Bart Kay, and another person that had quite an influence on me is Annette Bosworth, even though I think she's more keto than carnivore. But if you read her book, Any Way We Can, and what happened with her mother, where she basically cured her mother from some incredibly bad situation by making her pretty much go carnivore, a very restrictive, complete restrictive carbohydrate, and got her into autophagy. And I said, well, if it can work for that lady, it can work for us. And so, one of the impediments over the years has been, as I say, you live in a social environment. So we'd go and visit my daughter and they'd want us to have dinner with them. And then she'd cook the standard Australian diet. And I would try not to eat veggies. And my wife would say, oh, I better eat the veggies. Otherwise, she's not going to feel good about us, visiting and all that. But we've now gotten to the point where we go and visit. I eat meat. That's it. Anything else, I can sit there. They can scoff whatever they want. I'm quite happy with it. I'll just eat meat. And so, and then, of course, something else happened in our family between my wife and I. About 11 years ago, my wife had a mild heart reaction. We were out camping again, went on a very demanding walk, and she suddenly went really out of breath, and I had to help her back to the campsite. And then she went to the doctor that next week, and they said, oh, she's definitely got a blockage. They need to do an angiogram and have a look. And during the angiogram, they discovered that she had a blockage. So they put in a stent. And then she was fine till about probably July last year, just after I sort of recovered. Fortunately, she was okay while I was sick. And she had a really bad car accident. She was hit from behind while she was stopped at an amber light by a big semi carrying 10 cars on it, and it smashed her little car to bits, and she was terribly shaken. A week later, we took her to accident and emergency because she had chest pains, really bad chest pains. And then it took them another 3 weeks, and they put her on a treadmill. And she basically had an event on the treadmill within 30 seconds of them putting her on the treadmill. And so they rushed her into the angioplasm area, and they put in another 2 stents. And so, interesting, they booked her overnight. She only went in overnight. That was it. By 4 o'clock the first day, they'd already treated her. The next morning, she was given a diabetic breakfast. Now, what she got was a wheat Bix with low-fat milk, a carton of fruit juice, and a container of fruit and jelly as a diabetic breakfast. And of course, by the time I got her home, her sugars were like 16. And so I convinced her to really think carefully about joining me with this diet, because by that time I'd sort of listened to all these doctors and heart specialists and all sorts of people. I mean, the people I've mentioned, I've listened to hundreds and hundreds of YouTube videos. And it appears to me that if you stick to a proper carnivore diet, the chances are that you can actually recover from heart disease. And I mean, after her event at hospital, I mean, it's taken her probably 4 months to she's now pretty much recovered, and she's getting better by the day. And so it probably brings us to, what do we do now? I think, essentially now we are totally carnivore. That's it, both of us. We are carnivores. And because I've been pretty impressed with some of the scientific background that Bart Kay has come out with. I find him, as opposed to the people like Kelly Hogan and all the other people like myself that have sort of forced them, work hard enough to get themselves sorted. To me, Bart Kay actually, as does all the other doctors, Ken Berry, Chaffee, Mason, and Bos, they come at it from a scientific basis, which fits my orientation, right? And Bart Kay has come out with the 5 health hacks. Number 1, eat a carnivore diet, and specifically eat large ruminants. Well, we don't only eat we eat ruminants, because to me, I grew up with lamb and mutton, and so we sort of oscillate between lamb and beef, right? And we go into the butcher and we say, we want your fattest lamb, cut it up for us, and don't you dare trim any of the fat. And then we go to the butcher and we want a big steak. We go to the shelf, and as long as they've got like a rump with a big layer of fat, we'll buy it. If it hasn't got a big layer of fat, we won't buy it. And so coming back to Bart Kay, he said, okay, that's the first step. And eat when you're hungry. That's it. And stop intermittent eating. That's all background to it. Okay, we don't eat intermittently. We do have 1 meal a day, sometimes 2 meals a day, but we generally fast from sort of midday till the next day at about 11, 12 o'clock, when we'll have our meal. And the next thing he recommends, which incidentally, when I was that ill, somewhere he was talking about he called them nutraceuticals, the stuff from Cerule, Cerule, and I bought the stem cell enhancer while I was sick, and I started taking that. So I don't know if that had an influence on me getting better. But so we've been taking those simply because we take 3. One is a stem cell enhancer, another one is a plasma enhancer, and the third one is an anti-inflammatory. And somehow it seems, whether it's working or not, I'm not prepared to take the risk. We take it because Bart Kay said we take it. And we have improved, and I look at the improvement that Thea's made over the last few months. It's just incredible. She has actually de-aged. And then the other thing that we've started doing is we're earthing ourselves. And so we have an earthing mat on our bed. Once again, Bart Gay. We have an earthing strap when we work on the computers because we spend a lot of time on computers. And so we wear an earthing mat, and some of the, like we do some intensive meetings with various people, and that can sometimes go for 4.5 hours. And normally by the third and a half hour, I've had it. And since I've been earthing myself, I can go through, and even sometimes it goes up for 5.5 hours, one meeting, 5.5 hours. And I'm coping quite well with it. And I'm not a young chicken anymore. I'm now almost 78. So, and then of course the other one is, now the next one that we did was we started exercising a little bit, and I do some muscle exercise, and now and I don't know if you've heard of that book, The Unholy Trinity. It's a very interesting book, The Unholy Trinity. And this guy, just look it up on YouTube. It's very interesting. And this is a guy that got a heart attack in his early 60s, and he then went to full research on he started studying all the available research and basically came up with lots and lots of recommendations. So one of them is get out there in the early morning sun for at least about 45 minutes. So that's now the last thing that we've introduced. And right now, I mean, we're going well. I cannot believe the energy I've got. I cannot believe I'm the same person that was lying down this passage in bed, hardly alive. And that's carnivore for me. And, the best advice I can say to people, read, listen to people like yourself. Listen to all I keep listening to all your interviews. Well, probably not all. I listen to lots. But you listen to these people like, Kelly Hogan, and listen to, all these guys. And it's time well spent. And then read, like that book by Annette Bosworth. It opens your eyes, eh? Like she was a traditional doctor, which totally changed her views. But that's us. That's carnivore. Just be careful of all those influences.
So, congratulations. It's great to see that you both got to a point where it's like you've gone past such big challenges and you're feeling happy, and it's like the future, like it's, you're not thinking, oh, it's all downhill now, and that's awesome.
Yeah, no, we sort of worried about the future now, Something very important. As we started improving with this carnivore diet, our dogs were sort of on a mixed diet, a bit of kibble, a bit of this, a bit of that, right? And we've put them on a pure carnivore diet. And we've got 2 old dogs and 1 young dog. And the 2 old dogs, they have de-aged incredibly. They are, the little girl is 12 years old, and she's behaving like she used to behave when she was 5 years old. And the little boy is 14, and he now wags his tail and he runs up and down the stairs. It's totally changed them. And we took them to the vet for their annual checkup recently. And I managed to strike a vet so we call him a non-traditional vet. Because he turned around and he examined our 2 dogs and he said, what do you feed them? And I said, only meat. He said, don't tell anybody I told you, but that's the best diet for your dogs. And it really does.
And so you just give them raw meat?
Raw meat, yeah. We're very fortunate. We've got a butchery here that processes game meat, and they chop up kangaroo because they do cull many thousands of kangaroos in Queensland, and so we feed them kangaroo, and we get from our butcher, we buy all the meat fat that they cut off the steaks and lamb that people don't want on their food that they buy, and that costs us like $6 a kilo, and so we get like that, chopped it up, and then give them the kangaroo meat, and then some like a handful of chopped up beef fat, or mostly beef fat, yeah. And they just love it. And the interesting thing, the first thing they go for is the beef fat, and then they'll eat the meat.
So I've got a question about that, and maybe this is a kind of a too much information question, but did it take you a little while to work out how much fat you should be giving them? Like, would they have the same kind of bowel issues that humans would have if they have too much fat?
Yes, they would. And that's certainly something that, you know, I suppose I always want to give them a bit more fat, and my wife balances up by wanting to give them a bit less fat.
So you said you were doing an OMAD before, is that correct? How are you eating day to day?
Oh, most of the time, one meal a day. So we'll have our main meal. Well, our main meal around about 11:30, 12:30. You know, that sort of time. And then sometimes we might have another small meal, like 5, 6 o'clock if we feel hungry. But that's it. And our meal basically, what I find surprising, I think I'm actually eating less meat than I used to when I was on a standard, mixed diet, when I had lots of vegetables and meat. And we've seen this when we've had people for dinner. Both he and I will eat less meat than they will, even though they laid their, they will lay their plate full of vegetables, because we always cook vegetables for them because they don't buy into our meal. And, one of the frustrating things is that our children just don't buy into what we're doing. They think we're nuts. Too bad. They'll learn.
Well, and how about other people around you? How about friends and other relatives? Do they think it's weird as well?
Yeah, we actually, because somebody saw how well we were doing, they started sort of semi going, should we say keto more than a carnivore? And we're doing really well. And they were losing weight, and they're quite heavily overweight, big belly, and went to spend time with one of their children, came back, straight back on the sad diet. And one of the things that we did do wrong over the last 12 months is we started drinking diet Pepsi, diet drinks, and we've been off that now for the last 3 weeks, and now I never feel like it anymore. And I think that's another major improvement we've made. I think that might have been a significant factor in improving our levels of energy. Like, right up until about a month ago, I would have to really force myself to go and cut the lawn or whatever. Now I just say, the lawn needs cutting, I'll go and cut it, And some of the interesting things that have happened, just side issues, like I can go out in the midday sun in the height of summer in Townsville without a shirt, spend 2 hours in that midday sun, and my skin doesn't burn. I don't burn. I don't burn at all. I color slightly brown, but I don't turn red. One that people would have difficulty believing. Our dogs don't smell. We used to get body odor when we sweated a lot. We don't get body odor. about 2 years ago when I went to the dentist, I said, "Oh, your gums are starting to recede. That's what you expect at your age." I went a few weeks ago because I had a filling came out. And I said to this dentist, "What are my gums like?" "Oh," she said, "unbelievable. They're great for your age. They're fantastic. Nothing to worry about your gums." Yeah, all those things, there's lots more, but, just sort of people don't believe you. They
Yeah.
can't believe that you can actually enjoy the same kind of food every time you eat, because you eat when you're hungry. And when you've had enough, your body tells you. And I think, to me, the biggest problem that we face as a community is that we aren't utilizing our bodies to tell us what we need to do. I believe my body will tell me when I need to eat now. I believe my body will tell me when I've had enough. And for leptin to work, you need fat and animal fat. And that's it. And you stay away from those, so-called vegetable oils, because of especially what people like Paul Mason have told us about it. You stay away from all processed foods. We go to the supermarket and we buy mincemeat for the cat. We've got an advantage because we're no longer young chickens. We don't really care too much what other people think. We just say, this is what we do. Live with it.
No. So, what advice would you have for someone starting carnivore? How could they get started and stick with it?
Well, I think the first thing is they need to do their research. Really, and if they really want to be convinced, take a trip to your local hospital and look at the entrance and exit and just sit down there for half an hour and look at the elderly people who are in wheelchairs, grossly overweight, with their legs chopped off. And then decide whether that's the future you want for yourself or whether it isn't. And then that should convince you that there's something to think about. And then start doing your research. And if you're a reader, read the books. If you're not a reader, go to YouTube. Find these people. Put a search on for carnivore, and just see what happens. And listen to all these people that are turning their lives around. And everyone has had a different journey. So the more journeys you listen to, the more tips you pick up. And then you need to then make a decision. And, you've got to, I always think, before you make a decision to do something, do your research. Don't be a two-legged sheep. Work out what's the best thing for you. And I think, unfortunately, I'm really concerned about what's happening in Western countries at the moment. If you look at the money that we're spending on so-called health systems, and we're heading for a precipice. I mean, already the health system in Australia can't cope. It doesn't matter how much money they throw. They keep throwing additional $3-4 billion, more billion dollars, more staff, more hospitals. And all they're doing is people are getting sicker. Where I live, over 80% of people are overweight or obese. And to think that, thin people are necessarily healthy, that is totally, totally wrong. It's not the weight that you put on that create the disease. You create the disease, and one of the problems is being obese. And, during all my interactions with the medical profession, I actually got treated by one of the leading diabetic specialists in the country. He had me on 7 medications. 7. And I believe there's some people in Australia right now, that elderly people, that are on 12 medications. And he basically intimated that it's because I was overweight that I was diabetic. So I tried to lose my weight by exercising. I used to do 500 kilometers on the bike a week to try and get rid of all this excess weight. Didn't do anything for my diabetes. So, I'm really concerned for where we're going health-wise as a nation. And I don't think it's just Australia. I think it's America, Australia, UK, and the carnivore, these doctors that now promoting carnivore, they're like lone voices in the wilderness. And whatever you do, I know I listened to a little video this morning, one of the short ones where you said that you've now got 400 videos on the net. I think you're doing a fantastic contribution to helping spread the word.
Oh, thank you so much. So, Dirk, is there any way people can reach out to you? Do you have any social media or a YouTube or anything?
Not at the moment. What I'm going to do is I'm going to I want to start a social media. I've long ago given up on social media, but I want to get an utility, and because I want to make comments about what I think is happening, and in there I will post some, and then once I've got that set up, I might send it to you, and you can put it, within the description of this video.
Dirk, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story with us. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you, and I hope I help at least one person change the way they think about what they eat, and listen to people that really know what they're talking to. As an ex-farmer, the best way to assess whether people are talking sense is to look at them. So when the fat dietitian tells you to move more and eat less, you know that she doesn't know what she's talking about. And when a doctor like Anthony Chaffee tells you, eat meat, and Bart Kay tells you to eat meat, and all these people tell you what to eat, I think you can listen. Because their body tells you.